Renown fam, welcome back to another episode of the Renown Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Morris. I'm the founder and CEO of Renown. I'm also the host of this podcast, entrepreneur, Army veteran, you name it, I've done it. Y'all know that. Today, I am bringing you a pretty interesting idea. It's not my idea, unfortunately. I kind of wish it was because it's pretty cool. It's one of those things you're like, damn, I wish I would have thought of that. But this is a pretty cool, interesting idea. I'm bringing to you guys today, Jack Skeels, and he's going to talk to you about this philosophy he has about manager tax. And he's the founder and CEO of Better Company. He's written a book called Unmanaged, and I think y'all are going to get a kick out of this idea, and it's going to make you go, that's interesting. Anyway, I digress. Jack, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it, brother. How you doing, man?
Good. Thanks for having me on the show, Stephen. Been looking forward to this for a little while here. So let's hit it.
Yeah, man. Go ahead and introduce yourself real quick. Give your background or whatever information you want to give so people kind of get an understanding where you're coming from.
I think I'm maybe coming from a spot where maybe some of your listeners are coming from. When I started my career, one of the things I noticed, I was a sharp kid at the time. I felt like all my managers were sort of like idiots, and they actually, if you remember, that was way before The Office. But when you watch the American version of The Office, you'll see the exact same thing with Michael and everything like that. And somehow everything they said just seemed so ridiculously obvious, as if to not justify their existence, right? And that stuck with me. And I'm an old dog, as you can tell a little bit, got the gray hair and everything. But over the last several decades, I've sort of shaped this belief system that came from being a management consultant. I was a manager. I was as manager as you can get for many, many years. But then I got into a research institution called Rand Corporation, where I was studying organizations. And one of the weird things that I discovered in the research is that managing is actually the opposite of productivity. And most managers you talk to would say they are responsible for productivity. And so it's a very, very interesting paradox. And it's one I've been pursuing for the last 20 years now. And with our company, Better Company, we train organizations in how to be better companies. And largely it means managing better and also managing less. And so that's what the book was about, just sort of sticking a flag in the ground on the top of that hill and saying, look, you probably don't have to manage as hard, and you could be a lot better of a manager.
And one of the key points you talk about is managers are expensive, right? Especially the higher up they get. The managers get very expensive. And when you look at corporations, they have hundreds of these managers. That's millions of dollars and potential revenue they're throwing down the drain.
Oh yeah, no, it's crazy. There's this thing that goes on. I call it this sort of managerial myopia, is this inability to see it. So management is thought of, managers think of managing as a greater good, as in you can't do too much of it, right? That if one manager is good, two managers is even better, right? That'll improve our productivity twice as much. And as you point out, the top of the organization, which is managers, is the most expensive per capita part of an organization. And so it's sort of a very interesting opportunity for organizations. We see this happen with our clients, where they realize, I don't need to be hiring managers all the time. I can hire people who actually get stuff done.
And so I'm sure there are managers out there listening, and they're like deer in the headlights, like, look, I am not about to have my workload tripled because you just got all my counterparts fired. But that's not actually what you're saying, right? It's not just take away managers and dump that workload onto another manager. It's actually literally manage less.
Yeah, and there are two parts of it. One is we manage less, we do things we don't need to do. And that's some pretty large percentage of what managers do. A lot of times managers feel like they need to act managerial to show that they're a manager. The interesting thing, and this is in the research, it's so amazing, is that the amount of managing you do is inversely proportional to the amount of productivity the organization has. So in a way, there's this cool exercise we do, by the way. It's fun. When we go train a leadership group, we bring up this pyramid on the screen. You can imagine it's a pyramid, right? In the top half of the pyramid is the managers, bottom half is the workers. And we say, let's play a game. Let's send one group away for a day and see what happens to productivity. Let's send the workers away for a day. What happens to productivity? And they all acknowledge, yeah, productivity goes down because no one's working. What if we throw the managers away for a day? Just send them, but just go sit in a bar all day. Whatever you want to, go to the park, talk to each other. What happens to productivity? And they all laugh nervously because they realize that if they weren't there doing things, interacting with workers, people would just get work done. And in fact, productivity. Now, it's not that, and I love the example because no, that doesn't mean you can just get rid of all your managers. In fact, there's a thing in the Wall Street Journal right around the time we're recording this actually it was in March, I think, where the new head of Bayer, as you might say in English, in American, Bayer AG decided he's going to get rid of all the managers. I don't believe in that. I think you do need managers, but you don't need as much managing.
So how do you go about that first step then, managing less? Because I mean, when you first talked to me about this idea, I was like, that does that really work? I
Mhm.
mean, I definitely can think in my professional experience in the military, um, dude, like the army could definitely manage less.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
talking some very serious micromanaging going on there. But in the corporate world, I can definitely see where, a manager needs this pointless paperwork filled out again for the millionth time, or all these things that managers have to do that just it's just more red tape, and it's seeming just so pointless. I feel like if we can just eliminate that stuff and streamline it, make it easy, then we're already boosting productivity. What are other ways managers can manage less?
Yeah, yeah, you're getting a really good thing. My plan was to bring up the military example as well, right? In a way, there's always a parody in a military movie is the stupid lieutenant telling the very knowledgeable people what to do, right? And it's a real nice parallel in that way. Now, the one of the things we need to go back to basic principles to actually get your brain into this, which is one, the way we think we should manage is based on the old factory model back when in the 1910, 1920 era, where most of the people working in the factory were uneducated and they were either farm workers or there were people who were recent immigrants. Maybe they didn't even speak English, right? And so in that way, the manager knew so much more. The manager might even be college educated, right? And they're essentially illiterate people working for them and so they need to be very directive and no, don't do it this way, do it that way, that kind of thing. But that's nothing like our workforce these days. Okay, everyone is like wicked knowledgeable, wicked literate. Way more than it's not just reading books. It's YouTube and TikTok and anything I want to know, I can find out in 15 minutes. The the idea that there's some gap in terms of how much a manager has to fill in for people is like it's just gone. In fact, a lot of organizations, it's the other way around. People, the worker level is bringing in new ideas because they're not hampered by the way things have been working, right? So the first step is to say, what do we really need managers for? Okay. It's not to tell people what to do anymore.
Yeah, I love that. And it's funny because that's actually been one of my big talking points recently, that the 1950s way of leading, not just managing, but leading is gone, because back then it was personal is personal, business is business, and the two do not belong together. And I find that idea completely asinine, because if my mom just dies, or my dad's still alive, if my dad dies, I'm not coming on this podcast with energy and enthusiasm, and I'm not good to go, bro. Like, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like, there is no way to separate that. If I'm going through a hard time in my marriage or a hard time financially, it's hard to separate those worries from your professional life. And so what I coach people on is integrating the two, right? And then that's how we create this fluid team that's able to really handle the roadblocks that happen in our businesses. And so I love the idea you're bringing up that parallel of, look, 1910, yeah. And that makes a lot of sense. 1910, not that many people were educated. But like you said, today, YouTube, man, Google, whatever I need to know, saying I don't know anymore is just sheer laziness. If you don't know, you're just being lazy at this point.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's another piece to this also, which comes down to we should expect our people. One thing is if I'm dominant as a manager all the time, then my people don't think. They just sit there, and when they're not happy, I'm teaching them bad behavior, by the way, because they take that behavior home too, right? Okay. You go kick the dog all day, the dog goes home and kicks the other dogs, kind of thing. So I want to teach people good behaviors. I want to be, hey, it is your job to figure that out. Okay. I'll tell you what we need figured out, but it's your job to figure that out. And that way I don't have to manage you as much because you start taking ownership of it. And that, again, that goes back to this change in belief that if I really believe that people are smart and motivated and all those sorts of things, then all I need to do as a manager is actually activate that, turn that on, right? Not get in the way of it, not interrupt it, but actually be essentially, one of the ideas I talk about in the book is this idea of the humble gardener, right? In other words, I'm not a dictator, I'm not a boss, I'm not a manager, I'm a gardener. I'm trying to get people to grow. And I want to give them opportunity to grow and feed them and water them, that kind of thing, but it's their job to grow.
I love that. That is 100% in line with what I teach as well. We got to get people, we got to get out of this mindset that we have to be in control of everything. And I think that's the hard part, right? So we're managers. You're my boss, and you're putting all this pressure on me to get productivity up. And so what in turn, what do? I go put pressure on them to get productivity up. Where we miss the mark is understanding that as leaders, as managers, our job is to facilitate, like you said in your analogy with the gardeners, to facilitate growth. It's to facilitate the resources necessary for them to get their productivity up. So that's where we go and we're like, hey, our productivity is slacking a little bit. What are you seeing? What other forms can you see? Like, say I'm my productivity is low. You're trying to draw it out of me. How are you going to manage less, but still get my productivity up? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're actually hitting some of the key points in terms of at the end of the day, becoming a great manager, at least as defined in my world of unmanaging and managing less, is about how do we use questions to get people to think about things. The problem when you make a statement is nobody learns anything. Okay. Questions are the way we learn. And even you as the manager need to be using questions. I loved, you said something, I won't get exactly right, but it's something like, hey, what can we learn from this situation? Like if you think about when something goes wrong, right? Okay, you can go like, well, why didn't you get it right? Okay, what kind of question is that? That's just saying I'm blaming you, right? But you could instead you say, what was it about this situation that made it so hard? What is it about this situation that we're going to want to think differently next time we get into this spot so that we don't get the same outcome? And asking those questions start putting people on your team and literally turns them into being managers also, which is another part of the answer, which is I can manage less if everyone else is managing too. I don't need to be, my gift as as a great manager, if I was one, I don't know that I am, but my gift, I'm a great teacher of great managers. If my gift as a great manager would be that I can get other people, that I can bring other people up in their ability to self-manage and to manage together and the like. If I do that, then my job's kind of easy at that point.
Right. Absolutely. One of my philosophies, and tell me your stance on this idea. One of my philosophies has always been so as a manager or leader, and I know so to my audience, I always harp on not using leader and manager synonymously because I believe they're two completely separate things.
Totally. Yep.
But in this case, I'm going to combine the two, and you'll just bear with me, okay? Don't judge me.
Got
Anyway,
it.
so when one of my big philosophies, obviously, the number one job of a leader is to build their people, right? We already talked about that. One of the other things, it's my job as the employee to motivate. But what do I need to motivate? I need to inspire. I need somebody to inspire me. So as the manager, it's their job to bring that inspiration. And then that inspiration is the fuel for the motivation for the worker to get going.
You know, I'm going to go a slightly different angle on that, but I like where you're going. I tend to believe that there's even a bigger driver for people, and it shows up in some of the research. I'm about to sneeze.
You're good. Don't worry about it.
Excuse me.
Bless you.
Thank you. There's a bigger driver. It shows up in some of the research, which is that people taking ownership of their work, in fact, is a much stronger motivational factor than being inspired. Now, inspiration is a great thing. The thing is that when someone actually understands what they're working on, why they need to do it, and believes that it's their right and opportunity to do it, that they can grow from it, get the sense of reward, that it's their thing that they're completing, there are some ridiculous numbers that are associated with this in terms of improved quality, improved speed of work, and improved happiness inside of work. So in a way, I get, look, I think leadership, inspiring leadership is valuable. I think the thing that the problem is that when the leader, when that discussion is over, I'm inspired, but how do I keep that inspiration for the rest of the week, right? Or the rest of the month? And I think that that's where the taking ownership of the work. So as I'm doing the work, I'm inspired by taking the ownership of it and that it is mine and all those things. That's sort of what I teach, at least from our perspective. I think if you've got, I'm, I've seen like a lot of our clients are smaller businesses, 25 to 200 people. And this isn't an organization that can afford a, like publicly traded company, charismatic leader or anything that, and to be quite frank, some of them are good friends of mine. And though they're quirky in that way, I wouldn't even call them inspiring, but they don't need to be if their people are inspired by the work they're doing and the opportunity they have and that kind of thing. So I think it's tricky. I think it's valuable to have inspiring leadership. I don't think it's as necessary as having people take proud ownership of their work.
Not trying to be argumentative. But
Go for it.
I mean, I think you and I have two different definitions of inspiration then.
Okay.
Because to me, my definition of inspiration is everlasting. That's the difference between inspiration and motivation, right? Motivation is fleeting. As soon as I run into a wall, my motivation disappears. As soon as things gets hard, my motivation goes away. Inspiration is what you're talking about. It's that deep down core belief in what I'm doing. So when I say it's the manager's job or the leader's job to inspire, what I'm saying is it's their job to sell each individual employee on the company's mission, vision, and values so that employee is bought into what they're doing, that inspiration is there so that I am having a hard day. Today sucks. We're not meeting our quota. We're not meeting our deadline, whatever the case is. I'm going to put in the extra effort because I believe in what I'm doing. I believe in what I'm doing. Therefore, I am motivated to put in that extra effort. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. And I don't disagree with the value of it. I think I would, if I was to try and use similar terminology, I would say, what I'm looking for a leader to do, okay, is to inspire inside of that person the belief that they are the one to do that. Okay. That they are and I get what you're talking about mission. That's great. We have a mission. We're going this direction. But there is a person that needs to do this, and you are that person. You're capable, you're enabled, there's no one better than you to solve this problem and make it happen. If you need my support, let me know. But my inspiration is watching you, the worker, and how amazing you are at doing these things. And my belief is that you can get them done in that way. There's a little bit of a tweak on what you were saying, I think.
I don't know. I feel like we're saying the same thing, just
then cool. That's all right. That's all good. That's all good.
I don't know. But I do find it interesting though, because if when you walk into an office and they're doing their Monday morning rah-rahs, which are absolutely stupid, and you should all stop doing it. No one enjoys it. Not even the people leading it don't. Just stop it. It's all dumb. Anyway, I hate the Monday morning rah-rahs. It makes me throw up. But when you walk in, they talk, we got to go motivate. We got to motivate. We got to motivate. and to me, that's a big problem, because you know motivation to me is kind of what you're talking about. Like I said, it's fleeting. So sure, the company motivates me with a paycheck. Congratulations. That is a very fleeting thing for most people, and that motivation is gone, by Monday. You get paid on Friday, that motivation's gone by Monday. So I mean, I think it's a big problem that we have in the language we're using and the ideas we're putting in people's heads. And I think ultimately that really comes back to really damaging the culture of an organization, especially when that organization's as small as what you're talking about.
Yeah. So we're probably not that far off, like you said. So I just want to acknowledge that. And I think you're getting at some things, which is that the motivation, the research on motivation is really interesting, and there are a couple different ways to slice it. One of which is extrinsic versus intrinsic motivation, and another one is a thing they call hygienic motivation. Okay, so I'll start with hygienic. It is sort of what it sounds like, which is if I don't have this thing present in my workplace, I'm demotivated. Okay, like for example, if I have to walk a quarter mile to go to the restroom, okay, that's demotivating. Okay, it's something I expect of the workplace. If it's there though, nobody stays at a job and gets excited about it because of the quality of the bathrooms. Okay, right. So I'm getting at is that the hygienic factors, if you don't have them, then being treated like a reasonable human being might be a hygienic factor, right? If I'm treated poorly, then, but if I'm treated just like good enough, then that's not why I stay. Extrinsic motivation. I'm going to give you a bonus. If you hit your blah, blah, blah by a certain date, then you get those things work, but they are, as you noted, those are things that fade very quickly. In fact, there's great research on bonus schemes, right? For example, bonus schemes don't change outcomes. What they do is they make behaviors more lumpy, right? Whenever I get near the time when I'm trying to reach my bonus target, my behaviors change for a while, but I don't get happier. Okay. I may get more motivated, but I don't get more happier. And the net productivity doesn't go up appreciably at all. But there is one type of motivation that works, which is intrinsic, which is that I love what I'm doing. Okay. That I have a passion for doing it. And one of the arguments I make in the book, in fact, is just this. It is your job as a manager to ignite that passion for solving problems, for taking ownerships of things. And that's a motivation that I would agree with you, is that stays. Okay. If I believe that, like, wow, the feeling of getting this stuff done and that sense of mastery that I feel, that intrinsic reward, okay, is actually something that it just lasts. I carry it with me. I carry it with me home, right? And if I work really hard and get that bonus and I'm burned out and I go home, I'm a grouchy son of a whatever, right? Um, but if I get that intrinsic motivation, I'm like, yeah, I did a great job today. I'm so proud of myself. I go home, I'm like the best person in the world that day because I'm just like I'm so full and so happy, right? I think that's the opportunity and the challenge is that we don't have these hygienic problems in workplaces pretty much anymore. But the idea that I can sprinkle stuff on top of the workforce and they somehow get better or happier is just a complete lie. Whether it's your Monday morning meetings or bonuses, or I did a webinar years ago called "Why Free Beer Fridays and Skateboards Won't Make Your Business Better," right? Because no one that isn't what they're there for. That isn't what motivates them.
Yeah. I think I know what companies you're taking a shot at with that. And I wholeheartedly agree. When I saw the that PR push, I just rolled my eyes. It was like, what? Seriously? Beanbags? Like that's what's
Yeah,
making this
yeah.
a better work environment? Beanbags? No, that just sounds like my back's gonna hurt even more at the end of the day. But no, seriously, when it comes to our we have a listener listening to us right now, and they're like, all this sounds great, Jack, but how do I even begin to put this in practice? Where do I even start to put what you and I are talking about into practice?
Yeah, and of course that's the problem I ran into about 20,000 words into the book. I thought, well, the challenge is you underestimate the capability of your people. Second is you're stuck in this old model where feel like the more you manage, the better it is. So if I'm telling you to stop managing, then when do you manage, right? And how do you know what those moments are? One of the things I go into in the book is what I call the four key managerial moments. And there are really four things you need to be doing. If you do those things, and this is something we learned over a decade of work with over 200 companies. If managers get good at doing these four things, they're called why, what, go, and grow. If they're good at those moments, then it enables people. Okay. And then you kind of don't need to do much else. Okay. Except maybe talk to other managers because that'll keep them from talking to their workers, right? Sort of move them away. Manager to manager meetings, have as many as you want. In fact, it's just like, let's leave for a day, right? The the real answer is then how do you get good at those moments? And I go into that in the book. I'm not trying to keep any big secrets. You can read some of it on the book website and stuff like that. The but really at the end of the day, you as a manager need to start saying, all right, in general, I'm probably doing too much, and I should think about how do I do things less. One of our great clients, I'll end this comment with this. One of our best clients ever, he figured it out and got wired in. He said, "So what I do, here's what I do. I think about what I would have done before, and then I figure out what the opposite of that is, and I'm usually pretty close to doing the right thing." So in a sense, just undoing the idea of what you think managing is actually can be pretty effective.
How do we get our companies on board with this idea?
Mm. Well, like I said, there's some like the publicly traded Bayer AG pharma company that the new CEO says we're getting rid of managers. That there's a truth in that, which is it does need to come from the top, right? In other words, the ethos. If my manager is saying you're not managing hard enough, right, then I'm going to manage hard, right? And that's so essentially there is a chain, a causality chain that goes uphill on that thing. You need an organization that believes that maybe we don't need to spend as much on managers. And that means maybe we need to think about managing differently. Right. And once you've got that sort of spark lit, that's what all our clients look like largely. Some need a little bit more conversion than that. But really speaking of leadership, right? It's a leadership belief system. We believe in our people. We believe our people could be more effective if they are not as heavily managed. And we believe one of the things is we lose great talent into becoming managers. That's one of the other costs we didn't talk about earlier, which is where do those managers come from? Largely, they were our best people. and our best workers, and now they're not workers anymore, right? They're running around with other managers.
You know, I love that you brought that up because the company I worked for, which is a great company. For those of you who know me personally, I'm not throwing shade at that company. It was a great company. Love the company, love the people, and I will support them. Yeah. Um, but that was a big problem they had. I had this one employee working under me, superstar, great guy. Worked his butt off. Gets promoted, gets into the management program, and just plummets, right? Because they were teaching him what you're talking about, how to overmanage basically. And that went, now that I'm talking to you, I'm sitting here thinking about him, and I'm thinking potentially that went against his character, like his nature. And that's why one of the reasons why he tanked out of the program, because it was just too overbearing, right? And coming from working with me, because I try, like, if I have to see you more than once a day, then we're having a serious issue, right? I don't want to
Yeah,
see
yeah,
you.
yeah,
and,
yeah,
and
yeah,
I say that facetiously, but you know, that's kind of, if I have to see you because we have a problem more than once a day, then we have a bigger problem, is kind of what I'm saying. But that was always my philosophy. I'm very hands off. I want you have my trust until you prove that you're not trustworthy, type of thing. But he totally tanked out of the program and ultimately ended up losing his job. We had to let him go because it just, I guess it jaded him to the point that he just could no longer be productive for the company. And this cost us a huge producer, huge producer.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think it's tricky. There are a couple of things you've gotten there. It's a great story, by the way. The one is the reason those training programs look like that is because they're wrong. Okay, so here's the thing: is all the skills your guy had, they got him to that spot of being the promotable one, right? Were things that actually aren't good skills for a manager. Okay? That sort of personal attention to detail, and there's an internal monologue, which I'm not doing it good enough, not doing it good enough, right? And there's a competitive monologue, which is I need to do it better than them, and I'm going to stay up later or get up earlier and actually overachieve compared to everyone else. And when you become a manager, all those things are negatives. What you really want. And if I don't know what else to do, and especially if I get bad instruction like you're talking about, I'm going to go actually try and be like that to everyone else. I'm going to give them my internal monologue. You're not working hard enough. That's bad work. You need to do that better. All these things are where they may have helped me individually, they're extremely demotivating coming from another person, especially a manager and the like. And so you've got this weird situation where I get to the spot, I get promoted. I have zero skills, zero aptitude for it, though I may innately be a very chill, sort of supportive person. But what I see everyone else doing as managers is actually that same sort of thing, that sort of over the top heavy. There's research on it. There's absolutely very clean research on it that says this: if you promote your deep specialist, that's what they call it in the research, the deep specialist, promoting the specialist decreases the productivity of the department more than the loss of the deep specialist. Okay. In other words, they're bad managers. The best person to promote to manager is a generalist. So generalists that are promoted into the managerial role, the organizational productivity stays high, right? Because we keep our strong people doing what they're good at doing. And you can promote deep specialists and the like, but you got to be very careful about it. You need to have we do coaching in this area all the time. It's what we call it, the specialist to leadership transition. Yeah. It's a complete change and it's weird because you spent 15 years getting to that moment, right? And now you got to like unlearn everything. It's really crazy.
Yeah, I mean, and I want the listeners to understand Jack's not saying that if you're good at what you do, you don't deserve to be promoted. That's not what he's saying. he's saying that the general model of training needs to be altered. I think. Am I hitting the mark, Jack? That's
Well, I think there are
summing up
two
what you're
things.
saying.
You got a great point, which is one that one is we should train people in that transition better. I actually think that coupling career progression, which is what that person needed, they needed to be given a promotion. Coupling career progression and the management structure is a mistake. Okay. In other words, we should let that person keep on getting better and better, reward them, call them a guru, senior guru, master of all gurus. When I was at Rand Corporation, in fact, they had a title. It's sort of a fun story. They had a job title called, I think it was called Principal Scientist or Chief Scientist. That's what it was. No one in the whole 1,500 person research staff had that title. And I'd been studying the organization for them. I said, "What's this title for?" And they said, "Well, we promote someone to that when we want to get rid of them." So once someone becomes the chief scientist, then they're like, "Wow, I've been the chief scientist at Rand Corporation. I can go anywhere." And they're like, "Great, go anywhere." So the you can use titles creatively, and one of which is to just say, "This isn't about you becoming a manager." Okay. Is it about you helping other people get better at what they do, like a manager does? Sure, but that's because you're now a senior guru at this thing. You should have responsibilities to help people get better. You want to get paid more, you don't have to do any managerial bullshit. You're a senior guru now. Do we need someone to do the mundane day-to-day managing of this department? Absolutely. But let's not use your talent for that. Okay? So separate, and I talk about this in section 5 of the book. Let's separate these tracks. And I'll end with one thing. We have a client who decided, knowing all this after a great discussion, the client said, "I'm just getting rid of titles." I thought, well, okay, all right. So how's that going to work? And he didn't have an answer. But a year later, I saw him. He said, "I figured out the answer." One of my people said, "Well, what do I do? I mean, what do I put on LinkedIn? Right? How do I?" And he said, "You can put whatever you want on LinkedIn. I don't care. You just need to live up to it when you get your next job. So be careful about what you put on LinkedIn." But he says, "It doesn't matter to me what you say you are to the world. I know what you are here. We're going to pay you fairly for it, et cetera." It was just beautiful. I thought, genius.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think that that's an interesting take on developing ways to promote without, because you're absolutely right. I never even thought about that. There are moves to be made that aren't necessarily in a managerial position. I think that's pretty brilliant. So, we're coming up on time real quick, Jack, though. I would really love to hear just I pick up your book. What am I really going to get the nitty gritty on when I finish reading your book?
Yeah, it's a book that is, I will admit, way more dense than it needs to be because I wanted to I'm a teacher. I want to give everyone every answer they could possibly need. You will you will probably find any answer you need inside of the book. I think the key points, the key ideas in there are what are those 4 key managerial moments that I need to be really good at, right? And I go into those in some detail. And also how to lead with questions is one of the things we talk about later in the book for leaders as well. I've got some stuff like this organization stuff we just talked about. Like, do I really need managerial roles to be the promotion track, right? That kind of thing. I think though the biggest thing is just an awareness that you should be thinking about, is that the right thing to do? Is that in fact the wisest thing you can get out of this book is the idea that maybe I should stop and think about, is this next managerial thing that I'm going to do, is it the right thing to do? And is it the right thing for me to be doing? Right? Should I get others to do it, to take ownership of it, that kind of thing? So if nothing else, the idea behind Unmanaged, the name of the book, is that maybe we don't need to manage as much. And if I can get people thinking that way, I think we start things moving in the right direction.
Before we bounce, I want to end on this question because this is probably the most detrimental slash common problem I deal with my clients, and I'm sure you deal with yours, and that is the micromanager. to every single detail. Now, a micromanager, that's a whole form of psychology that we don't even have time to delve into. That's the need for control. That's all kinds of psychological things going on in that person's brain. The good news is, I would say, in my experience anyway, about half of the micromanagers can have it trained out of them. The other half, they need professional help, uh, from psychologists. Um, what is your take on micromanaging and how employees can best deal with a micromanager?
Well, I was really happy with the question until that last little hook there, but I'll take a swing at it. Look, I'll start with where you ended, which is what can you do as an employee? If you're in that situation, then I'm sorry to hear that, right? I mean, there's real in a way, a micromanager, as you say, is someone is asserting undue control usually over process and actions and even the sequencing of your work, right? And those sorts of things. I can tell you a couple things, and I love what you said about the sort of splitting them into two groups. In the groups we work with, we tend to see there are people who tend to overmanage because micromanage, I call it over, but micromanage because they came up as a specialist, right? So it's all I know to do is talk to people about their work, right? And I'll do that in those tones that aren't all that good. There are people that there's the other side, and I agree. There's this side that actually feels like, yeah, but I kind of like that, right? And I like telling people what to do. It feels good, whether it's a power thing or whatever, those sorts of things, or that I just think that that's what I should be doing. Some percentage of those, like you say, are coachable out of that, right? And the others, well, they're if you start changing the way the organization works, they will leave. I've ample evidence of that. If you really change the ethos of the organization, say, we want our people to be thinking, okay, and we're going to institutionalize the idea that people can ask questions and question authority and those sorts of things. Those people who just want to manage people, they'll go. They'll find some. There are plenty of other places still where they can find a job and get the joy that they get from controlling people effectively.
We'll
Um,
probably
so
have beanbag chairs too.
stay out of the beanbag chairs.
But I mean, no, it's a good point, and I never actually thought of it that way. Um, it's interesting because I feel like there's a certain level when it comes to over managing or micromanaging that is just the sense that that's what I need to do because that's what everyone did before me, which is kind of where we
Yeah,
started this
yeah.
conversation. And those are really the ones I'm talking about that can have it coached out of them, trained out of them, because that's not how we do business anymore. So go ahead and walk us through real quick, Jack. What audience listening, like, man, I need to bring this dude into my company. What's the experience going to be like working with Better Company?
Well, I'd love to hear from anyone that we can help out. We are an advisory consulting and training company, and that's where we start is on the advisory side typically, unless you know of us from our other work. A lot of times people come in and say, I want X because I've seen you do X. But basically come in and talk to you about what you'd like to see as change and how to get there. And we've got a lot of models we've worked with and that are very successful at getting organizations to make the shift and the like. You can reach me on LinkedIn if you want to connect with me directly, Jack Skeels on LinkedIn, or go to our website, which is bettercompany.co, bettercompany.co.
Bettercompany.co. And of course, everybody, you know the deal. I'm going to have all the links to Jack in the show notes and in the description below. So make sure you scroll down, go give him tons and tons and tons of love. Make sure you tell him when you do that you heard him right here on Renown Leadership. Before we end, Jack, the guest gets the final word of wisdom. The question is always the same. What does leading like a champion mean to you? But in your case, I'm going to change it.
Shit. Okay.
Never done this before. What does managing like a champion mean?
It's a great question. So let's think of sports teams. Okay. A Bill Belichick or an Andy Reid or NFL coach. There's a manager of a championship team, right? That's what managing as a champion looks like. Is it's that, yeah, it was Andy Reid's team, but it was the team that won the game. And I think that if you listen in the end, it's always so interesting when they interview those winners on NFL and other sports. It's interesting that they will, for a moment, they will say something about their own performance, but largely they will point to everyone else and that it couldn't have happened without them. And I think that's what managing as a champion means, is realizing no matter what you think of yourself as a manager, you're no good without a great team. And in fact, with a great team, you are amazing.
I love that. That is such a good point, and you're absolutely right. I always kind of roll my eyes when they're like, "Oh, I did this, but thanks to the O line, whatever. Thanks to the coach for a great game plan." And it's like, man, we want to talk about your performance specifically. Stop diverting the question. Like, I get being humble, but stop. But no, that's such a good point though, because when you look at whether it's elite special operations teams in the military or elite professional athlete teams or elite sales teams, they all have that one thing in common. It's that cohesion, and you're absolutely right. The manager is strictly there. It's not to soak up glory. It is simply to facilitate everybody being great and working at the highest octane possible. So, Jack, I absolutely love that answer. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for bringing this value to my audience and for being a gracious guest. That's going to wrap it up for this week, guys. I appreciate you tuning in. I will see you all same bad time, same bad channel next week. And in the meantime, never forget, lead. Oh, I stand corrected on this episode. Manage like a champion. I'll see you all later, everybody. Goodbye.
Take care, Steven.